we're going to move on to our next presenter. Yoni, if you would just give a wave, I'm going to introduce you in a few minutes. But our beginning, as you know, every one of our presentations has a moderator, and our moderator today is Toby Rosenthal. Toby is a teacher in the School of Communications here at Stockton University, and she teaches film. And as you know, film is, Toby, I think there's some sound in your background, but
sure.
it just stopped.
Okay. I'm unmuted.
Okay, great.
Okay.
And Toby teaches, she'll tell you the courses here. She teaches in film. And she and Steve are partners. What do I mean by partners? Steve Marcus, they both teach in dual high school credit. Steve proudly said to me that after he did his presentation, there were 5 high schools that are interested now in dual high school credit in Holocaust and genocide studies. And Toby, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and the dual high school credit program that you represent, and then put your contact information in the chat box so that you can share that so people can get in touch with you. We have about 20 high school teachers today in our program.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. My name's Toby Rosenthal, and I am a teaching specialist with communication studies. Some of the courses that I teach are digital storytelling, intro to mass communication, and the course that Gail is talking about where I partner with Steve as a dual credit coach, that course is called Writing for the Media, and that's one of our foundation courses with communication studies. So if your students take that at high school, at the high school level, they are then sort of promoted to, that's a prerequisite to enter into the next level of comm courses at Stockton. So that's a really cool thing. We're currently working with a few high schools. At Carver Township High School, they have a comm academy. Also in Camden, Woodrow Wilson, we're going to be working with in the fall. So I will put my information in the chat, and I'm excited to be here today. Thank you so much.
Toby, we look forward to you moderating the questions in the chat box, and also some of your summations or whatever you want to share with us. And so now, my newest best friend, I'm saying that smiling, in Jerusalem, because I did not know Yoni until about a week ago. Shalom, Yoni.
Hello.
Shalom, and hello. I give you a little background about Yoni. He was born in Paris, as in Paris, France, and it just coincidentally, we have some participants today from the school that Yoni graduated from, or didn't graduate, but attended the junior high school that he attended in Paris, France, are with us today. So we'll say bonjour to all our friends from Paris, as well as Yoni. And in 1992, he moved to Israel with his parents and studied in Israel. And he has been associated with the International School of Holocaust Studies at Yad Vashem. And his job is to provide programs in Europe because he speaks more than 2 languages, meaning I know French, Hebrew, and English. I don't know what else. And he's been designing programs to meet teachers' needs, and in particular, teachers' needs that focus on film. So with my pleasure, I want to introduce to you Yoni Berrous, and we will continue our informal way of presenting our seminar. And I'm sorry that it's difficult for us to unmute folks because some of you are on phones. So we will continue to put comments and questions in the chat box. So for us, it's still morning, Yoni. So I say in Hebrew, Boker Tov, which is, good morning to you. But tell us, what time is it in Jerusalem?
So, hello everybody. Thank you very much, Gail, and thank you for this incredible seminar. It's already 5:37 now in Jerusalem. So, but I think it's a good time. It's a good time for all of us to move on to the next session. I just would like to say, wow, Jackie. First of all, hi. Long time we haven't seen, and it was incredible. I had the privilege to listen to Jackie many times, but it's incredible how it goes to so many different directions every time. The poetry is there is no end to it. It's all about a reflection and going deeper and deeper. And I will try. I made some change in my presentation during the time you were talking, because I would like to make some connections between the very subject we're going to talk about and also the poetry. And so thank you very much for being part of this team. It's been incredible also for me to be in touch with you and Morgan and Irvin, and thank you, Toby, for moderating this this session. And so I would like to put the presentation first, and then thank you. Oh, I need your approval for sharing the presentation. And then, yes, excellent.
You should have it, Yoni.
Thank you, Irvin. Great. So we are going to focus today on films, and the goal of today will be to give you practical tools in order to accompany your teaching. Films and the Holocaust is a vast subject, too massive in order to encompass it in 1 hour, and so something like that. You can do a whole semester about it. You can dedicate I think many years only to this subject. And what we are going to try to do is to actually, again, to make connections with things that you discuss during your seminars, and to see how you can use them, especially today when we need different tools, new technologies, in order to have a meaningful debate, meaningful teaching with our students. What exists and what is appropriate for our teaching. So, and before we start, I would like to start with a question, and I would like to have your comments on the chat box. When I say Holocaust films, Holocaust movies, because this is the title, what comes to your mind first? What is your reference? It will help me to understand, again, what you were familiar with. It doesn't mean the first movie that you just have seen in your life, but maybe if you would like to say the important films, 1 or 2 films. It's interesting just to see how. And maybe Toby, you can, maybe when people are typing it, maybe we can mention them, and just to have an idea. The Israeli public maybe will have some references, the French public will have other references, and the American or Canadian will have also their references.
Yeah, they're flying in Schindler's List, Sarah's Key, Defiance, Another Schindler's, Au revoir les enfants, Piast, Defiance, The Gray Zone, Night and Fog, Shoah, Denial, The Great Dictator, The Pianist, Defiance, Life is Beautiful, Ostatni Etap, Zookeeper's Wife, yes, there are more, Son of Saul, Defiance, Bag of Marbles, Sophie's Choice, Judgment at Nuremberg.
Excellent. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So it gives me a really good picture about what is your knowledge, and I can see it's very wide, and I'm in good company here, and I can see that you have seen films. We know that movies are one of the most important media in order to transmit knowledge. and also to remember. This is something that we know research has been made. That's a very important tool in order to teach, and it also has a very important place in our audiovisual culture. As you can see here, I can imagine that you are familiar with this website. It's a reference in the world of cinema, movies. It's not only American films, it's about films from all over the world. Films, and there is a category here, there is a genre that's, which actually the very word, the very term of Holocaust movies also exists in Hebrew. We say Sirte Shoah, it exists. It's interesting that in French, there is no proper word for Holocaust movies. I don't know why. It's interesting, even though that the Holocaust has a very deep and strong impact on French culture, literature, cinema, and etc. And you can see here that there is a different list of orders, and Schindler's List will come first. I do this exercise with many of my classes, including students or teachers, and most of the time, the two biggest references that I will get will be The Pianist and The Schindler's List. Obviously, there are two very important films. You mentioned others, and yes, there are subgenres, and we can talk about them because we are talking about fictions and non-fiction movies. But those two films are very, very famous for a good reason. They use a tool, a genre, which is classical realism. Let's look at the top of the two pictures here on the top. We have two pictures from two documents taken by the Nazis themselves. Here we can see Jürgen Stroop, who took pictures of himself and his unit, the Waffen-SS, crushing the rebellion of the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto in April 1943. Those are historical pictures. Now, on the bottom here, you can see two other pictures from the movie The Pianist. Now, you can see here, so Roman Polanski, you know, is the director of this film, and he is himself a Holocaust survivor. He survived the Krakow Ghetto, not the Warsaw Ghetto. And in this film, you can see there is a kind of mixture between his memoirs and Vladislav Spielman's memoirs too. So it's a combination. But many of the aspects of this film is about the concern of being very accurate. You can see here how there is a concern to replicate the scenes from the past. There is a concern of showing what happened as it was, and to be as accurate as possible, even about the angle, the position of how people, the posture of the people, where they're looking at, etc. This is a genre in itself, and we can say that historical movies use this genre, classical realism, in order to be accurate, right? This is what we try to do when we teach history, to tell what happened in the past. Well, now, having listened to Jackie, I would like to go back to what we just discussed an hour ago, when Charlotte Delvaux, she mentioned this dot on the map, right? When we acknowledge the fact that Auschwitz existed, right? When we know that something existed, when we can say, when we visited a place, you know, many Israeli students go, thousands of Israeli students, they go to Auschwitz Museum, they see barracks, they see the gas chambers, they visit the place. Okay, so they think they know. What is this aspect that we are maybe missing when we are telling the past just by showing the physical aspect of it, right? I came to a kind of conclusion after, not a conclusion, but maybe another way of thinking about films and the Holocaust after watching this film. Now, That's the only, we are going to watch a couple of 2 minutes of this movie. And from the whole list that you will get from Morgan, from Irvin, from Gail about what we recommend, we don't recommend this one, okay? That's just for the sake of the introduction. Because I would like to redefine what is a Holocaust movie. Let's discuss about what do we mean by Holocaust movies. This film is not about the Holocaust, okay? It's about, I don't know if you're familiar with Todd Solondz and his movies. It's a very difficult film. It's definitely for adults. It has very many different aspects which are not appropriate for children. And it's a very harsh criticism of, we can say, American middle class. There are 3 different stories in one movie. And each of them is about the crisis of the middle class in America. Right now, it happens that one of those families in this film is a Jewish family, an average Jewish family living in a suburb, and we are going to watch together a family dinner, right? Listen to the discussion between the people in the family, and we'll discuss that in a minute. So, Erwin, can you just play the first video, please? So I go back to the presentation. So you can see here that it's only 2 minutes. It's about a discussion. It's about the Holocaust. In many cases, I can see smiles on the faces of teachers in the classroom. Now it's a bit hard for me to look at all your faces, but because on the one hand, it's a fiction, but in many cases, maybe you can react also. You can tell me what you think, but it's very close to reality. It's something that we can definitely see that happening in the middle class, not only in America, also in Israel, also in France, can testify. Teachers from all over Europe, from North America and in Israel relate to that. And it's interesting because I had to, when I watched this film and I saw this scene, and I had to watch it again, and I watched it, I think something like 7, 8 times, because I had to figure out what is about this scene, and I realized that what they are talking about, it's all about what we are doing at Yad Vashem. My colleagues and I, we are something around 150, 200 educators at Yad Vashem working on those questions. Here you can see I have a very short list of issues that are raised in this. First, what can we talk about with each age group, right? Because we have 3 boys, and the younger one, he's listening to a discussion which is going nowhere. Now, you realize that there is a big story in the family there, which never came up, apparently. And they discussing about definitions, right? Who is a Holocaust survivor? What is the Holocaust in? What is the place of concentration camps in it? We have the place of the school, right? You have here a teacher who gave a film to watch, an entire film to watch. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing to do, but you can see here the question of the tools. What are the good tools in order to teach the Holocaust, and how we have to accompany the student? It's raised there, and there is a harsh criticism in it. And what is the role of the parents too? Should the parents give up on every part of their responsibility and put all the responsibility upon the shoulders of the teachers. And what are the right questions to ask? Is it a bad question to ask? This teenager, the middle one, not no, the older one who already had lessons about the Holocaust, and he's feeling bored in his life, and he feels that it's redundant and it's not meaningful. And is it right to ask questions or not? And to which question we have to focus on, and on what we have maybe sometimes to put on the side. So those questions are very important. And I realized that this thing is all about our challenges. Now, can we consider this film as a Holocaust movie just because of these 2 minutes? When the entire film is about completely different things, when we have here maybe the biggest challenges about Holocaust memory in our generations, which sometimes you will not find it in historical movies. So this is why, and maybe my own opinion would be that maybe this movie is not a Holocaust movie, but I got to the conclusions that we have to ask ourselves questions before we are using films. And because I would say there are a couple of characteristics that exist in films that sometimes they have a big impact on us. The very first thing that we have to ask ourselves is, what is our goal? And if there is something which is very important to remember when we are talking about movies, is that we can see that in many cases is that something we are driven to use movies because we were influenced by them, because they are very powerful. We think that we have to use them, and we have to think twice what we are doing, because the main principle that I would like to put on the front is that we have to use tools according to our goals and not the other way around. And sometimes you can, and because this is powerful, sometimes we can see that we feel obligated sometimes to use some, because everybody's talking about the movie now in cinema, or because an entire generation was influenced. Sometimes I'm sure that if I will ask you, can you name one film that changed your life, the way that you're looking at the world, that changed your worldview? All of you, of course, all of us, we have a poem, a book, and we have also a movie. And sometimes we think that because we were impacted by this movie, that also our students are going to be impacted by this movie. Well, we do think that first we have to think about what we want to achieve. Do we want to teach? Do we want to reflect? Do we want to teach the facts? Do we want to reflect on the deeper meaning of what is a human being? And the question like we just discussed with Jackie an hour ago, do you want to commemorate? Because we can use films in order to commemorate too. But commemoration and teaching, it's not exactly the same thing. Do we want to mourn also? You know, we mourning and commemorating is not exactly the same thing. Is Schindler's List going to be the tool for all those goals? Well, we think that no, and we can say that one of the mostly asked questions that comes to us is, what is the best movie to teach the Holocaust? And there is no such a thing, because everything depends on your goal. It might be the best movie for you to teach. If you want to prepare, I don't know, a class to a visit in a museum or a memorial, or if the Israeli students are going to travel to Poland and visit the camps, maybe the pianist will be a good thing. But it might be the last thing and have, you know, backfire, as you can see here on in the scene of this movie, if there is no thinking behind it. So I know that I'm in good company here, and if you are participating in this seminar, is because you want to think about the goals and to think about the tools. But I wanted to say that as an introduction, because this is very important. It's going to accompany us in all our session today. So what are the principles to try to keep in mind when we want to use films, videos, and we are going to talk also about animation films together today.
Yoni, before we get into your recommendation for approach, I wonder, Toby, if you would just share some of the comments from in the chat box with Yoni and others.
Sure.
And anything you want to add.
Sure. There seems to be a theme in the chat also about the use of clips and how they can be really strong attention grabbers. Judy Vogel has a really excellent point that it illustrates that much of our teaching takes place also in sound clips and asides, and that we need to be able to answer the dinner conversation question with as much clarity as our lesson plans. I think we all agree, right, that clips can be used, and in thinking about how to approach classes, I think also really engaging people at the top with a relatable clip or something that has that wow can be really powerful. And then it can prompt, it's like watching a trailer, right? And then it can prompt, this is why we're doing it. This is how it folds in. And then Steve writes also, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, that some films must be shown in their entirety, right, about context. And then Jeff writes, who is a true survivor? Even survivors disagree. That circles back to the actuality of the conversation that we witnessed from dinner.
Great. So I would like to jump on it and to use those comments, just also to mention another thing. Yes, so obviously you can use an entire film, but also you can use clips. You can show portions of the movies. Why? Because you are the educator and you know what you want to achieve. When I remember again when we discussed that just a week ago, we say that we have to remember one thing, is that cinema is an art and an industry, and when the people created, produced those films, they didn't have in mind maybe the what we have in mind as educators. They are not educators who created those pieces of art or those products also that we consume. So this is why you are totally right to mention that we and everything depends on our goal. We are going to discuss much more today about productions and videos that were created by educators or that were adapted by educators. So you can take that entirely and you can use that, and again, according to your programming and your curriculum and your overall goal. So now, in order to go into the question of what are the best practices, we think that we need to, especially with what is going on YouTube and everywhere on the internet, in cinema, we can see things very from various qualities. It's very important in order to have a meaningful discussion with the students to, first of all, to teach them what was the Holocaust, to have the context right, in order to know what we are talking about. So teaching the core, I will use that here, this principle, it was coined by Professor Bauer, Yuda Bauer, who said that we have to go back to the core in order to have a meaningful discussion about the Holocaust. Now, it doesn't mean that we cannot create art and we have different fiction movies about the Holocaust. An artist is free to do something as long as he's respectful and he's not trying to do something hateful. He's free to do to interpret the past in his own way. But as teachers, we want at least our students to know what happened. Second, also, we can ask the question, what should we focus on? Because we can teach for hours and hours about how the Nazis killed the Jews in a million different ways. What happened inside the gas chamber? Is it the thing that we would like to achieve or not? Gail, you mentioned previously about also the uplifting message. how we can reach that, how the videos, how films can help us in order to focus on the right messages according to the age of the students. Teaching the text within the context, so I just mentioned that, also putting the emphasis on text inside the context. And I will give you some example. The safely in and safely out approach, how cinema, how images are powerful. Words are very powerful, and images are also very powerful. You can ask psychologists; they will say to you. I've heard once from a Israeli psychologist, Lawrence Kaplan-Dreyfus. She said to a class of mine, when teachers who came to have a seminar, and she said that it's harder sometimes to close our eyes when we are watching a film than to close a book when we are deeply impacted by it. So sometimes we can, when we are reading something very, very strong, we can just stare elsewhere and reflect on that. But sometimes when we are in a cinema, when we are watching a film at our home, and we can be deeply, deeply absorbed, because it's not only our intellect that is, but also our emotions that are deeply driven by the composition of and the production of the film. So this is something very important that we have to remember, and how we approach the subject of teaching the Holocaust in a safe way. How we can introduce main themes of the Holocaust with films, and how we can make connection between those things. Those are the things that we are going to try to cover together during the rest of our time. Now, I would like to now focus on teaching the core. What was the Holocaust? And I would like first to introduce you to, so it was already mentioned to you, but the video toolbox, the Holocaust education video toolbox of Yad Vashem, that you can find on the website. And it's, so if you go to, there is the main page of Yad Vashem, and you can go to education and e-learning, and you will have educational videos. So it's very easy to go there and to find, you will have a long list, something like 80 videos. Some of them are 1 hour long, some of them are just 2 minutes long. And they can help you to teach very important subjects, core subjects of the Holocaust, like ghettos and the final solution. I've chosen for you this next video, The Great Deportation in the Warsaw Ghetto by Abraham Levin's diary. It's about this crossroad of the time of the deportations from the ghettos. So it's about the theme of the ghetto together with the theme of the final solution. What happened to those people who managed to survive 1 or 2 years in the Warsaw Ghetto? What happened to them eventually, and how they were deported, most of them to the death camp of Treblinka. How we can tell this story when actually we have very, very few pictures from this event, and on what we are going to focus. And here the concern was to focus on the voices from the ghetto, the very people that experience it. So you are going to watch only a couple of minutes, 4 or 5 minutes from this 7, 8 minutes video, when in it you will have only 2 voices. You will have Abraham Levin and Emanuel Regenblum voices, not their voices, but going to be narrated by someone else, but their writings about what was happening there. So Yad Vashem didn't add anything to that. It's just about the visual aspect, documents from the past, and the voices of the victim. So let's watch it and discuss it in a minute. Please, Morgan, video number 2.
A meeting of Oynik Shabbos. Its tragic character. They discuss the question of ownership and the transfer of the archive to America, to the Yivo, if we all die. It's a wonder that people can endure so much suffering, living the whole day on a knife edge between life and death, and clinging with all their might to life in the hope that they may be among the 10 survivors. Early this morning, the Germans and the rioters spread through the ghetto. In the course of 5 minutes, they drove out all the occupants on Gensha Street, between Zamenhof and Lubiechka Streets. They pay no attention to papers. Eclipse of the sun. Universal blackness. My Luba was taken away. I have no words to describe my desolation. I ought to go after her, to die, but I have no strength to take such a step. I will never be consoled as long as I live, to fall into the hands of such butchers. How tragic it is, a life together of over 21 years has met such a tragic end. The sight of the streets, the pavements are fenced off. You walk in the middle of the road. Certain streets are completely closed off with fences and gates, and you can't get in there. The impression is of cages. The whole of Jewish Warsaw has been thrown out of the buildings. There's a full-scale relocation of all Jews who have not yet been rounded up and are still in the town. The pain because of the loss of Luba is becoming more intense. My soul can find no peace for not having gone after her when she was in danger, even though I could have also disappeared and Ora would have been left an orphan. There's talk of a second front in France and Holland. If these things had happened 4 or 5 weeks ago, perhaps we would have been saved from the catastrophe. 6 in the evening. Jewish policemen have returned from the town and said that the action is continuing. So, all our hopes that the bloody action has ceased now have been swept away. How will we survive? How will we be able to bear it? People talk of the special danger that now threatens children. A terrible dread seizes me when I think of the fate of Ora. She has no documents and is in danger. Since Friday, no news reaches us from the other side of the wall. The terrible appearance of the streets, transformed into an Umschlagplatz. The crowds of Jews with packs on their backs, streaming from the streets of the ghetto. Everyone is camped out on the street. The Svetsha family has perished. He gave himself up after seeing how his wife and 2 children were taken. Initially, he went with us to Geisha Street. Later, he went back, gave himself up, and was sent away. I feel a great compassion and admiration for this straightforward person. We tremble at every noise and shot that comes from the street. Today is the 52nd day in the greatest and most terrible slaughter in history. We are the tiny remnants of the greatest Jewish community in the world. A Jew has returned to our workshop who worked as a gravedigger in Treblinka. According to what he said, not only Jews from Warsaw and of the Gubernia are being exterminated in Treblinka, but Jews from all over Europe, from France, Belgium, Holland, among others. Those who are far away cannot imagine our bitter situation. They will not understand and will not believe that day after day, thousands of men, women, and children, innocent of any crime, were taken to their death. Almighty God, why did this happen? And why is the whole world deaf to our screams? How terrible it is that a whole generation, millions of Jews, has suddenly become a community of martyrs who've had to die in such a cruel, degrading, and painful manner. and go through the torments of hell before going to the gallows. Earth, Earth, do not cover our blood and do not keep silent, so that our blood will cry out until the ends of time and demand revenge for this crime that has no parallel in our history and in the whole of human history.
Thank you, Morgan. So I would like to discuss different aspects that I can be raised from this video. Here we can see that this is very important, because I think you discussed that with Sharon. Right? A large part of the visual aspect of the past of the Holocaust was taken by the Nazis themselves. And in many cases, even if we go to documentaries, there is a famous documentary, British documentary, I think created by the ITV production, The World at War, from the 70s. It's a reference when regarding the documentary about World War II and the Holocaust. This production based itself on the documents of the Nazis. They didn't do that by purpose. They just collected what they could collect at the time, and it was documents, archives from the SS, from the Nazis, pictures that they were taking, documents they were taken at the time, and so we have one perspective only. Here, the concern is to bring back the voice of the victims. When we can have different layers, different subjects that are in those only 5-6 minutes. Yes, you have the story of the individual, but considerations about also the breakdown, the collapse of the family, the disintegration of the family and the people, and universal also consideration that are discussed in it by Abraham Levine or Emmanuel Ringelblum in other parts of this Oynek Shabbat archive. You have here also a proof of resilience versus the dehumanization that those people had to endure from the very beginning of the war, but also in face of the destruction and in face of the annihilation. And this in the context of moral dilemmas that are going to hit them on a daily basis. I use this video a lot to discuss not only the daily life of the ghetto, but not only the stage of the final solution, but this crossroad and this transition between when people move from one place to another. The question of what do they know at different stages and how they reacted. They were not passive. They were responding to the situation. They couldn't do much, but they were responding in their own ways. And if we don't give them back their voices, it's going to be very hard to tribute and to the human being of how they strive to stay human beings as much as possible during those times. Now, I would like to mention now another very important production that was created very, very recently. 2 years ago, it came out. And Who Will Write Our History? This is a movie that was created, a longer feature movie, something about an hour and a half, but that was adapted also thanks to Facing History and ourselves. They adapted an educational version of this movie, because the original one is very, very difficult. Some aspects are we think not appropriate for students. But you can see here are some other aspects. Obviously, also the Great Deportation and the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising is represented in this movie. But I would like now to focus on another aspect, a earlier one in the creation of the ghetto by the Nazis and their reaction of the Jews. And this very subject of this film is the creation of the Oyneg Shabbat archive. So Morgan, can we play the next video, please?
Saturday was terrible. People in the street didn't know it was to be a closed ghetto, so it came like a thunderbolt. A wave of evil rolled over the whole city, as if in response to a nod from above. The ghetto is closed, and a new era begins. A man who visited the other side tells of the great difference. The cafes are full of people. The streets not overcrowded as in the ghetto. Those who read horoscopes for the Jews say they are bad.
Emanuel Ringelblum understood that he had a story to tell, and it was the most important story he would ever have to tell. But in order to do it justice, he couldn't do it alone.
Just 8 days after the ghetto was sealed, several of us met with Dr. Ringelblum in his apartment on 18 Lezhna Street.
Drei Takones. Als me sein besoide soides.
The whole institution was dubbed Oyneg Shabbos, which means the joys of Shabbat, for reasons of secrecy.
Chciałem, żeby o naszej zasadzie historycznej powiedział się Hirsch.
Alles ist wichtig. Viele Kleinmörstkenigkeiten. Schreibt als was ihr seid. Als was ich hört.
At the beginning, their basic goal was to collect and to record eyewitness accounts and use the materials to write the history of the war from the Jewish perspective. The Germans are sending film crews into the ghetto to show everybody how dirty we are and how filthy we are. They're telling the world that we're the scum of the earth. And unless we collect our own documents, posterity will remember us on the basis of German sources and not Jewish sources. Will the Germans write our history, or will we write our history?
So here you can see this is a very important production that is using a different genre in cinema, which is a docudrama, and with which they are going to invite historians in order to explain what was happening. We are going to we'll have documents from that time that are going to be shown on the picture, and we'll have actors playing the very scene from the past. And the very center of this of the narration will be, again, like we have previously seen with the Yad Vashem's production, is going to be the voice of the victims. So it's a very interesting tool to use it. You can, it was created for teaching. So go on Facing History and Ourselves website. You can use that. You'll have the shorter version. It's something about half an hour. We just discussed now one aspect of it, but watch it and rewatch it, believe me, you will find a lot of levels, layers that you can discuss with the students. When here, I've just discussed the question of the perspective and the question of the passivity in front of the activity of the Jews, and the question about is there here a difference between the physical and spiritual resistance when the Jews are going to take the very important task to write down everything that they are going to experience when they didn't know what is going to happen next. We know, but they didn't. So physical resistance, spiritual resistance, moral dilemmas too. Questions of
Yoni,
identity.
just
Yes.
for a minute, Toby, could you share with the teachers how they can, we know they can see the edited or the shorter version on the Facing History and Ourselves website, but talk about the availability of the full feature-length film? I guess Toby's not there.
I'm here.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Hi. Okay. Sorry, I was muted. So now I'm able. So the Holocaust Resource Center and the AZ's Museum of Woodbine Heritage purchased the rights to show this film. So teachers, please let us know if you would like a showing of the longer or edited teacher version of the film. And I see Morgan has linked that too. I also have a question from the first thing that we viewed. One of the questions in the chat came up about the stamp that was in some of the archive or over it, the AKH. Yoni, do you know what that represents?
No, I will check that. If Cheryl or Jackie, if you know something about it, but that's something that I'll come up with an answer regarding that.
Okay, Cheryl or Jackie, if you just put that in the chat box to Toby, she will share with everyone. Thank you.
Sure, and also just wanted to note from a technical producer standpoint, that first version that really relied on the voices, the audio was so clean and crisp, and the music was really interesting to pay attention to. So for students who might be looking at it also with production interest, I think that that's really interesting, that use of the audio and how the image really worked to do that next level of story. But because, you know, voice, audio, really just thematically from a production side, that's a great example of using those storytelling elements. And it was, you know, listening to the music changes and hope clips, you can really hear those changes in the soundtrack as it's happening. That was a really great example.
So you're talking about the longer version of Who Will Write Our History, is that correct?
Unmute. What we had viewed prior to that had the AKH on
okay.
it, that was called the
Great Deportation.
The Great Deportation, that's what I wrote. Yes. So that was the journal, the diary. Yeah. So
of Avraham Lewin. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Great. So so here you can see that and Toby will tell me if I'm wrong, but the idea of the second production of the shorter version is that you have educators who thought about that in advance, people who really thought about what is appropriate, and here we can have a good example of when we have one thing. It doesn't mean that an entire film cannot be appropriate for watching, even though that plenty of movies have issues with nudity and with strong language and things like that, that we have to be careful. We have to be very, very sensitive about those issues, even though that the entire film is very, very interesting and important and sometimes very accurate. But there was going to be one aspect of it which is going to I won't say ruin it all, but still is going to create a kind of obstacle that we'll have to deal with when we'll not have those issues, when we have productions that were created by people who thought about that in advance. Another thing that I wanted to mention, a very interesting production from the Polin Museum in Warsaw, Museum of the History of Polish Jews, who created an animation movie, which is also a kind of docudrama in which we can see the Holocaust survivors themselves, the people who participated in the uprising. And when there is no will to reproduce the past, you know, in a scene, but here you have a clear distinction between the past and the present. When you have the animation movie, which is about what happened there, and you have historians and Holocaust survivors that are going to accompany that. It's also something around 30 minutes. And here you have the very, very center of the story with the uprising. And it's not only the physical aspect, the physical resistance, but also the dilemmas, the discussion between the young fighters, the impossibility to know what is the right decision to take at every moment, and the very story about the fact that very, very few of those people managed to survive and can help us to talk about the glory of this story, but also the very, very, you can say, humble aspect of it, when it was very, very much about fighting for dignity and to write down a couple of sentences in the history book of the Jewish people when they knew tremendously that they couldn't win a battle, a physical battle against, at the time, the strongest army in Europe and in the world.
There are some, I'm sorry to interrupt, there are some questions about the use of animations. Why is there the tendency to use them? And then also, what are your feelings about using animation to tell these stories?
So we are totally confident in using animation. From the moment that we think that animation is a tool like another tool. From the moment that we know what we are doing, from the moment that we keep the facts right, from the moment that it is done with sensitivity and we know what we are doing, we ourselves, Yad Vashem, this is exactly what I wanted to do now, to show to you how we are teaching the text and the context, sometimes together and sometimes side by side, by using animation. You can tell the facts together with animation, and it's not going to trivialize the Holocaust. Now, I understand this question because we know that a large part of the trivialization of the Holocaust was also made and created because of new tools that we can see on YouTube. We know that there is an entire topic of the video games, and when we have the Holocaust in it, some of those video games are done with a certain level of sensitivity, and some of them are very, very disturbing, and it's bothering us. We know that. But we think that when it comes to animation, because it's very close to this subject of those tools that can be, bring some kind of banality to the subject of the Holocaust, we know that we can have those reactions. But we use that, and we know that it is useful from the moment that it's used in a right way. I'm just going to show you another project that was created by Vashem, which is the key historical concept. So if you go to the very same website that I've shown to you, the educational video videos in Yad Vashem's website, you will find the key historical concept categories in which you will have very short videos, 1 minute, 2 minutes maximum, when you will have sometimes complex terms and themes that are going to be explained to a young public together with animation. And Morgan, can we watch the fourth video?
The first concentration camps were constructed in Germany in 1933. They were primarily used to solidify the regime by using political terror and incarcerating those perceived as dissidents. The working model for these camps was Dachau. After the consolidation of the regime, those perceived as a threat to the Nazi vision, such as asocials, were also sent to the camps. At this stage, especially following the Kristallnacht in 1938, the number of Jewish prisoners in the camps rose significantly, the majority of whom were exploited for economic purposes, many as forced labor. Due to the significant rise in prisoner count and the need to exploit the conquered territories, including their manpower, the Germans began constructing many more labor camps, some solely for Jews. During this period, prisoners of war camps and other concentration camps were constructed as well. The number of concentration camps constructed in Germany and throughout Europe continued to increase. From this point on, the concentration and labor camps were used for massive and brutal exploitation of prisoner labor and for implementing the policy of mass murder of Jews. For this purpose, 6 extermination camps were constructed and converted from existing camps. Some of them were concentration and extermination camps, such as Auschwitz-Birkenau and Majdanek, and some were exclusively extermination camps, such as Chelmno and Treblinka. In total, tens of thousands of different kinds of camps were constructed, in which millions of people were murdered or died.
Yoni, there were a couple of questions that I wanted to pose, if that's okay, before we, as we reframe. There's the teachers are asking also that, you know, about, again, the idea of animation or cartoon, that it can be degrading, it can desensitize students. Also, there are links to video games with that. So that's one piece of the question. Also, there was a specific question about what we just viewed, what the name of that was. And the third thing was about having access to the film, There Was No Hope. So I have a 3-parter for you. But also with the animation piece, and I'm not sure if this is helpful at all, I've walked this line with the graphic novels, and I've really had this debate about, is this enough for access, not necessarily about Holocaust education, but just as in reading. And I've talked a lot with psychologists about this, and it's about meeting students where they are, right? And getting them to access in some way, at least from my perspective as both a parent and an educator, seems like a win. But this is a different level. This isn't accessing literature, right? This content is totally different. So if you could share some insight about that, that would be really helpful. And then, thanks.
Yeah, so regarding the resources, you will be sent a document with all the links, with all the titles of the videos and the links, so you can go there, and some of them are among other videos too, so you can go and discover by yourself other videos that might interest you. Now, regarding your second question, Toby, I would like to show the second video because it's very important in order to, you're talking about a very important subject, about accessibility and how you can yes, how you can discuss some of the subject with the students without yes, oversimplifying or not paying tribute to the subject in itself. I would like to show, and then we will discuss that, because I think it's the other side of the same coin, to talk about this second animation movie that was created by this Israeli artist, Ayelet Anisk. And she created this video after visiting Yad Vashem, and when she worked on a project which is about gathering the fragments. Gathering the fragments is a department in Yad Vashem where they're trying to collect any piece of objects, of memory of the survivors and the victims. And she came across this portrait. It's the portrait of Shoshana Rochlitz. And well, let's watch, it's also only 2 minutes. Let's watch this animation movie because it's talking about the story of this very portrait. And then we will discuss the difference between the first one and the second one and what is appropriate according to which goal. So please, Morgan. Okay, so I think you can see the big difference between this video and this one. The previous one was very much about the facts. It's very much about to explain sometimes, and that can be a complex subject. It can be something that also, you know, I know that in Europe and in America, I know that we need to explain what is the ghetto in the context of the Second World War, because the term ghetto is used in different contexts by different kind of people from different generations that experience also different things. So you need to, there is a very specific goal to introduce the students to a very certain historical topic, when the second video that we just watched is discussing a total different level. Is also talking about some concepts that sometimes it's very hard. Sometimes we know that when we have groups of students coming to Yad Vashem, maybe Cheryl will say something about that, or Jackie will say something about that. We know that we have 2 or 3 hours with them only, and we know that 80% of what we are going to say to them, they're going to forget it, because the mind cannot keep every aspect of knowledge that we learn. However, we know that they are going to keep something around 15, something around 20%. What are the main concepts? What are the main words, terms that we want them to keep with them? So if they are going to forget one date about the evolution of the camps, maybe that's okay. But if they are going to forget the very term or concept of dehumanization, we think here it's more problematic. We want them to remember this was very much about the dehumanization. And this is something that it's very important, and we need sometimes different tools. And again, according to your goal, because we use this video, the second one, a lot with Israeli students. The Israeli Department of Teacher Training and Guiding Department, when they do workshops, they use those short videos regarding the very context of the Israeli students when they've watched already they've watched already The Pianist, they've watched already a couple of Israeli movies about the Holocaust. They have been told already about what is a ghetto. They have in their families, they have grandparents who are or were Holocaust survivors. They have their very own experience. And sometimes when you have something which is engaging, but still close to the reality, and not doing any simplifying the story. And
Yoni, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
The producer in me has been flagged to give you a 7-minute warning, and then to also encourage our teachers to leave their final questions, please, in the chat. There's been some great comments, though, also about the last video and its difference from the first that we saw regarding the animation. One comment, this last video was powerful and well done. I believe the level was amazing and able to be viewed by all age groups. Sometimes if a real face is not seen, it's powerful. At other times, it's very important to see the real faces. There was talk also in the chat about generational connections to animation and also graphic novels as well. Another great thought was about, is animation, these sort of images, an easier access point for really hard topics? I think that that's really valuable and important as well. Randy writes, have students make and express their own animation, video, art, digital works. I think that's really cool. Adobe Spark has some free resources for educators and for students that you can typically access through your school accounts as well. Barry writes, I don't think students will understand the facelessness of this video. I don't think they will even understand the idea of the faces appearing at the end as well. Those are great thoughts and comments.
Those are great comments. Exactly, those are great comments. And what I'm trying to show to you right now, it's different kinds of videos, different kinds of genres that can help us at different levels. For some more advanced students, they can't discuss again the factual aspect of the Holocaust. It can be redundant. It can be, if we do the same thing all over again, we can get this very reaction that we had in the very beginning of the session, and oh, we've done that last year also. Now, if you feel, and that's the thing that we're trying to say is that at the end of the day, it's you that you know, your public. A tool will never do the entire job for you. You will have to have a goal, to have a program, and you will have to use those tools that will serve your program. If you feel confident enough that your class is at the right level to discuss also this aspect of faceless aspect, the human being, the dehumanization. I've reached very high level of discussion, and sometimes, and maybe I was, stereotyping a specific classroom. So the class would say, "Oh, you don't look very, very interesting." I try not to be someone. We are all stereotyping all the people, and I've reached with them a very, very high level of discussion. And sometimes I was also surprised on the other, in a negative way. But at least you know now that you have different genre, different tools that can help you. If it's documentary, if it's feature films, if it's docudrama, if it's animation, if it's done in a good way. It's like we talk about the comics, right? Think about Art Spiegelman and Mouse. Now we know that comics, that it can also be connected with this genre of medias, like the videos, like animation movies, that they can do a sort of trivialization of the subject. But we know that when you have an important story, and when it is done well, and you have someone which is capable, you can have something which is meaningful. And I think that Art Spiegelman really changed the face of the discussion around the question of the second generation and the question of remembrance. So now we have a very little time to cover all the things. I will go much faster. I will show you maybe only one last thing before we get to the final discussions and conclusions. But the safely in and safely out approach is very much around the question. Sometimes I ask the question, we'll not do this exercise because of the lack of time, but almost every group that I have, I ask them the question, when I just mention the word Holocaust, what comes to your mind? But not about terms and abstract words or concepts. What about pictures that come to your mind? What can you see when I just mention the word Holocaust? In many cases, unless you are totally disagreeing with me, but in many cases, and this is with American teachers, European teachers, Israeli teachers, people will tell me that they will have a black and white picture in their mind. They will have somewhere barbed wires. They will have a cattle car or barracks of a camp. They will have, if they will see people in this way. Right? And here we're going to talk about the very subject of representation.
Yoni, I am the assistant to the producer, and we're down to, I'm so sorry, and this is a wonderful problem that we always run out of time. So we need a ending sentence 2 or 3 or an image. I hope we don't end with this image just because I like From Despair Comes Hope, because we need to end at 12 promptly, and we have just a couple more things to do.
Okay, so I will just finish this concept, which is I think a very, very important one, and it will be the closure of this session. Just would like to to say that the way that we remember is very much because of the way that the visual pictures that were suggested to the world after the liberation. This is why the very topic of, and we have a dehumanizing view of the victims because of that. Now, I'm not saying that those pictures are not important, not at all. I'm just saying that those pictures brought us only one aspect. The way that the Nazis left those people behind them. Totally dehumanized people. This is why it is very important for us not only to teach about the life before, the Jewish perspective during the Holocaust, but the returning to life. And I will just finish with another topic, which is we have also films which are talking about the liberation and return to life. That's a very important subject too. Why? Because we can also portray them in the way that maybe much closer way that maybe they wanted to be portrayed, and not like the Nazis left them. So it's not only about the question of the liberation itself at the very first moment, but the whole process of returning to life. You will see Cheryl in a minute in this short video, talking again, bringing the voices, explaining what happened, but also bringing the voices of the people that were there, and they had to endure another challenge and another phase, we can say, of the Holocaust, which was after the annihilation. So what we try to do today, so introduction of the matrix is the same thing that we can say. You can use any theme, and the video will be a tool that will accompany your teaching. And I've asked you to watch the, and maybe you can say a couple of things about that as in conclusion. Maybe I will just go further. I wanted to show
Yoni, I am so sorry, but we must end at 12. And
so we have 5 minutes, right?
No, we don't have 5 minutes, because we have a little bookkeeping things that we need to do here. But we see on the screen what should be our approach, and we can write that down. And I'm going to turn it back to Toby, our you called yourself the producer for today, but our moderator. Toby, your concluding thoughts?
Sure. I just wanted to echo all of the teachers in the chat's gratitude and how much we were able to learn in this short time together. We have a lot of ideas about different access points for engaging students with video content, also thinking about animation, different images, different entry points. So we are really grateful for that, and we will continue looking into these things and how we can continue to use them. So thanks so much.
And Yoni, in 5 words, you said what is so important to me and to everyone else that is an educator. The film is only a tool. How many times do I get phone calls? I showed Schindler's List. I taught about the Holocaust. You have led us the way. You have shared with us so many ways of introducing the Holocaust and using film to supplement what we're doing in the classroom. And when you said, remember the way of the visual picture after liberation, we're going to remember the way you taught us. And I'm so grateful for the way that you've left us at the end, that from despair does come hope, that we have liberation. We know that the survivors didn't always feel that they were free, but you left us with hope and hope for the future. And this is just the beginning of your association with us at Stockton University. And we look forward, Yoni, let us know. Can we have a continuation of this seminar another time with you?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gail.
Yes.
I obviously, I would be more than happy. You can see that so many. I can only wait to have more discussion about it. All the remarks were right and were meaningful, and I learned a lot also about the different perspectives of the teachers and challenges. And I'm sorry because I didn't understand you well. I thought I had a couple of more minutes. But thank you so much. I will be very much happy to.
Thank you. And let's all clap for Yoni. And I love those hand signs. If you can do that quickly to show him. Yes, there you go. Oh, there we go. Brianna, thank you. Brianna, I can always count on you, and Deborah. And Sean Rickens, another former student. Carolyn, thank you so much. And please, please remember to do your evaluation. So important to us. And thank you to all our sponsors. Have a great rest of the day. All of you, thank you for taking out from your free time to join us for the Wally and Lutz Hammerschlag Summer Educator Seminar. Thank you. Stay